And there's a outcome attached to you being nice. So it's not really coming from a true, authentic place. Right? And healthy women, like healthy, beautiful women who are in the power, they don't want a fucking nice guy. Right? They don't. They want a guy that's going to stand in their truth, that is going to be willing to say no to them at times, right? That's going to be willing to upset them at times, right? The nice guy is basically someone, you're energetically castrating yourself, right? Because everything you're doing is just to gain approval from the feminine, because you don't approve of yourself.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Building Men podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Anthony Moralda, my good friend, my younger brother. How are you?
I'm looking red.
Yeah, we have the studio. We changed the lighting in the studio to where you have red light on you, and I have this bluish green light.
So now I'm going to switch over to this one, and watch this. There's like a distinct
line of demarcation between the blue and the red light.
Yeah, I feel like God, I can't even think of his name. Just keep going.
I'll keep going. I'll pull you out of this.
Blew it. Yeah.
So you fucking blew it, dude. All right, so I stopped on the way here today, got a cup of coffee, and I was so disappointed. I've come to rely on the lids for the coffee that have, like, I'll give you an example. I have the lid right now where you have to kind of peel it back, and like the plastic splits, and you have to like fucking dig it in. Yeah. And I was so sad that they didn't have the other lids there, and I was like, I've come to rely so heavily on those other lids that you don't have to.
You want the one with like a nipple on it?
Yes, so the nipple-ish lids. I've come to rely on these right now, and I was like, how fucking fortunate am I in my life that this is something that threw me for a loop this morning as I'm coming in here.
Yeah, it can completely dictate your mood that you don't have your special lid.
That I didn't have my special lid, so I wanted to first acknowledge that.
Are you okay?
I might need some space to fully
I can give you that space.
Thank you for that space. So as I'm driving in here today, it's about a half-hour drive into the studio. I really started to think about growing up with Dad and our adventures going in to get a cup of coffee with him, right? And so when we would work with our father, so this is for the Building Men audience who haven't heard this story yet, our father owns a painting business, right? And he's a hard-ass worker, like would wake us up at 4 in the morning. We would start work at 5. For no other reason than that's what he always did. And so we would start work super fucking early and painting apartments. And so we would go and we would work our asses off. And the only time we could take a break is if we were driving from one place to another. If we had like 6 apartments to do in one location, you just worked and worked until you were done. So we were always dehydrated. We were crying and sweating and breathing.
Stop to do anything.
It was really crazy. If there was that rare occurrence that we would be driving someplace to a different, Wawa. We would pass a Wawa or 7-Eleven or a Quick Check or a Quickie Stop or whatever it was. Yeah. We would go in, and it's this funny story. I remember one of the first times I was working with you, we went in there and you went to order a sandwich, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Know.
Are you fucking kidding me? Like, Dad's gonna kill you if you're allowed to get a coffee and a buttered roll, and that is it.
T-minus 45 seconds to get in and out as quickly as possible. And I went to the order station.
You're gonna order a sandwich,
and he hunted me down like he was a fucking lion and I was a wounded deer. And he ran up to me. I remember he was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm getting a sandwich." He was like, "Hell, you're not." He was like, "What are you, insane? Let's go." He canceled it immediately.
You get a buttered roll and a cup of coffee.
That's right.
So Dad would take the cup of coffee. He'd eat his buttered roll, take the cup of coffee, take the lid off. It was piping hot, and he would drink it like it was a Gatorade, and he just came off the court in the NBA championship. He fucking slugged down this cup of coffee. Meanwhile, I'm like...
It was 1,000 degrees.
Oh, my God.
Cinched all of his taste buds in one sitting.
So I had this moment of recalling that with, some reverence. And it was a moment that I just said, I went back into that spot in my mind with us working with Dad. But then I also started to just transition to, okay, we have this... one of the guests that we have on today is a guy named Zack Alexander, and he works with men. He's a men's coach, and he does shadow work. And so we're going to talk to him about that today. But I really started to think about just the way that we were raised by our father and just the life experiences that we had and things that we maybe felt comfortable speaking about with our father, things that we definitely did not feel comfortable about, and how those experiences dictated how we would be as adults. So all that shit that was in our head, and so it really got me going down this deep path of all the stuff that we have gone through in our life, through our relationship with our father and our mother and things like that. So having said that, I wanted to bring on our guest. And our guest today is none other than Zack Alexander. We had a little opportunity to touch base with you for a couple minutes. And this connection between the three of us is definitely synergistic. We have a lot to talk about today. So welcome to the podcast, Zack. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on.
And I appreciate you putting up with just our nonsense in the beginning. That's how we typically start off. It's just a couple minutes of just some, throwing the shit around a little bit, see what sticks on the wall.
I enjoyed it, so we're good.
It's all good. So, what about the coffee thing, though? I see you're drinking a cup of coffee right now. Did you ever think about that? What I just said, or is that just my insanity right there?
I think it's more relative to your insanity, probably.
Right, exactly. And I appreciate your willingness to throw that out there too. It's one of the things. I feel like
that's more of a you thing.
So talk to us a little bit about, and we'll go all over the place in this interview. But I just want to start with the definition of a men's coach. When you say, I'm a men's coach, I do work with men around shadow work. What does that actually mean? Like, how would you define that if somebody came up to you in the street?
So I'll start off with the term shadow work, right? And so basically, I feel like we come in and we have these constructed personalities, right? These little narratives and stories that we tell about ourselves that is rooted in our ancestral, cultural, like societal conditioning, right? And sometimes these labels can even be like, I'm Zack and I'm a good guy and I'm a loyal guy, right? Which is great. But basically what happens is any qualities that run counter to these like identification labels, we'll repress them. Right? Sometimes we'll repress our own internal power. Like if we grew up and we knew we had to people please, we'll suppress the parts of us that were in our power and spoke our truth and things of that nature, right? So with shadow work, what I'm doing is I'm basically going into the subconscious or the unconscious self, right? We're talking about like Carl Jung type psychology, and find the parts of ourselves that we repress. Because a lot of men are fragmented, right? We had to suppress all these different parts of us because we were told, well, this isn't masculine, or shut up and sit down, or things of that nature, right? Some of us really repress the really dark aspects of ourselves, and then they end up controlling us from the subconscious in really fucked up ways, right? Like a good example I use, and it's pretty controversial, is pedophilia in the church, right? Just in the sense of you have these priests who suppress their natural innate human desires, right? And then that comes out in very shadowy ways sometimes, okay? And so what I'm doing is I'm helping men locate the parts of us that we press down and how to be with them and how to integrate this part so we become like a fully realized self, right?
Did you have those dark experiences growing up? And well, this is the first time we've ever mentioned pedophilia on the Building Men podcast. Just want to recognize the going into that realm, which is it's important to talk about all the shit that people think about and the shit that as men we repress and we put down or push down. Even just the nice guy thing. You mentioned I'm a good guy, I'm a loyal guy. The nice guy syndrome is a real thing. Reading the book No More Mr. Nice Guy was a game changer for me. I was a nice guy. I was a people pleaser. I was a approval seeker for a long time in my life. So you mentioned, that shadow work, that shit that we repressed down. Take us back to your development and growing up. Were there things along the way that you were like, I can't fucking deal with this. I can't talk about it, so I need to push it down. And that led you to your journey in helping men in that capacity.
Yeah, well, so for me, I went through like every childhood trauma. Okay, it's not a boohoo story, whatever. It's just I came from a fucked up upbringing, right? And when in my early 20s, I became really sick, right? Just completely. I was actually like bedridden for years. Okay, and none of the doctors could really figure out what was wrong with me. Now, eventually, we figured out it was something related to my time working in Africa. But at the same time, I had to figure out why I was getting sick and no one else was. Even once I healed that infection or that I had, I still noticed that like my body was continually shutting down. And so no doctor could tell me why. And so I started going in and recognizing this had a lot to do with the emotional self. Like I was suppressing and repressing really large aspects of me, right? Even the aspect of me that like wanted to hurt people, right? Just pressing away all these different things, and it almost becomes like a weight that you're carrying on your back, right? And your body and your immune system can actually literally just shut down just from suppressing energetically all these different things. Okay, when I actually started going into the unconscious self and bringing up these things and not necessarily acting on them or overindulging them, but accepting them and integrating them, all of a sudden all my physical health issues resolved themselves. All of a sudden I found a way to speak my truth. All of a sudden I knew what the fuck I wanted to do and how I wanted to show up in the world, right?
You were going to say something?
No.
All right. The thing that you mentioned about being pushing that shit down, and as my work, working with kids in elementary and in middle school and beyond, as shit happens to kids, they have these adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, when they experience a trauma and they're not able to deal with it at that time. They're not able to truly like understand and fully experience whatever is going on. So it manifests itself in a different way as an adult. You mentioned like you're bedridden, all this shit came up. One of the podcasts that we listened to, or one of the interviews, you go deep into shit that happened to you growing up. And again, I don't want to like pull the covers back, so much so early, but we're talking about men. This podcast will come out. It's November right now. We're talking about men's mental health and really honoring it. And I talk very candidly about shit that happened to me growing up, and how I fucking pushed that shit down for so long. So there were times that you dealt with shit that you weren't really capable of dealing with, and you reached out to adults, and no one really like listened to you. You were basically stonewalled, or you had people put you at an arm's distance. Like no, that's not happening with you. Talk to us a little bit about that experience growing up, and your lack of faith in adults from that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I went through child sexual abuse at a young age, right, from a family member, continuously on a routine basis. And so when I was in school, like, I was really acting out and really trying to get conveyed to them, like, that something was happening, right? And I was just being labeled as a bad kid, right? Or something's just, whatever, right? And I'm like, no, look, like something's going on. And kids have a very difficult time articulating, so they'll do weird things. Like I said, like things were like stabbing me at home, right? And the teachers would just be like, oh, what does he mean? He just wants attention, right? And so yeah, it was continuously getting pushed away. Like I remember even in high school, like I would be drugged out beyond belief in class, and it was just go to the principal's office. Like there was never an inquiry in why I was doing these behaviors in the first place, right? Why I was acting out. And I see that all the time, especially with men, especially with young boys. We're labeled just bad kids, right? When really boys are just trying to get attention, they seek help, and they're doing so in the only way they know how, right? So yeah, that's a little bit of a background in terms of, how I was trying to seek help, and adults just weren't showing up.
Right. What did you need? What did you need to hear from the adults, from the teachers, from those people in your life that could have helped you when you were going through that shit back then? What did you need from them? What would have helped you?
I needed an adult to step up and really start asking serious questions about what's going on in your home. What's happening in your home? Because as a kid, you're scared. You're scared to really say it. Like you need an adult to really get in and create a safe space, right? And then where you feel comfortable, like kind of really relaying the truth and being honest about what's happening. And so I needed a safer container for some adult to come through and be like, what's really going on? What's happening? I don't think really anyone really took that inquiry, because usually what they did was they would pass me back off to my family and just be like, oh, take him to the therapist, right?
And if your safe space is not in the household, and the school's reaching out to your family saying like something needs to be done here, it's that continuous cycle is just gonna go on. It's gonna go on and on forever. And the fact that you dealt with all that shit, you developed mistrust for adults as well during the process. You reached out to people and no one was there for you.
Yeah, and this is what happens too. Whatever is like you almost form this negative relationship to authority. Then we have men or boys who aren't helped by our systems and institutions, and they believe they can't trust any type of authority figure, right? Which is really sad, because in indigenous like tribal societies, a boy became a man through listening to elders, through having mentorship, right? But now, since boys can't trust their own authority figures that are coming into these systems, we don't trust even like we don't have eldership anymore. Right, we're left to become men on ourselves, and that's why you have a lot of boys in adult bodies, right, just running around, because we can't trust our own authority figures. We can't trust these people that are supposed to come in and help us.
So because of that lack of faith in the mentorship and the elders, like you had mentioned, where did you develop your sense of masculinity? Did you look to, social, things in society? Was there anyone in your life that you're like, this is what it means, or did you just discover it on your own?
So, I mean, I think I experienced every shadow aspect of the masculine growing up because I lacked that strong masculine figure. I said in a video, like, I was the druggie, I was the emotionally suppressed fuckboy, then I became the sick guy, right? Then I became like the hyper intellectual, like whatever that is. And then I say the new age wimp, right? These guys that kind of enter into like the spiritual community and you're like, oh, I'm so nice and right? I think that's its own very, very, very shadowy form of masculinity. Okay. So for me, it was more so like I was stumbling around figuring out all the shadow aspects. Ignore my dog; he's a pain in the ass. All the shadow aspects of the masculine, and then I stepped into men's work containers. Okay, so it first started off in group men's work, whatever, where I started seeing strong men lead, and then I started started having men's coaches, right? And I started, instead of like taking my money and investing it in vacations or whatever whatever the fuck that is, right? I really was just taking it and investing it into strong men to help lead me, right? To help me take me in. And it was through those men that I was able to develop my own sense of what it is to be in the healthy masculine, what it is to be a man. And it's always an ongoing process, especially, for me, I had a very, very, very weak father figure. So it's definitely an ongoing process, but I think being able to invest in myself and male mentorship is what allowed me to really start stepping into this construct of being a healthy man.
I appreciate you're talking about going through those dark times and really embodying all of the like shadow archetypical figures that are out there for men, because pretty much, I mean, you could walk around and be in this darkness for a long period of time. You, on your own hero's journey, you said you reached out to a couple men who mentored you. Do you remember a specific time in your life where it was that, Robert Frost poem with the the two roads? Was there a specific time where you're like, this is it, I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I don't like this fucking person that I see, I need to start going down this other path? Or was it just a gradual journey for you in a different direction?
I think there were two main forks in the road for me, right? I think when I was like 20, so I'm 30 now, when I was 20, and I really looked in the mirror one day and I said, this isn't fucking working. Like, I'm a mess, right? And that's when I decided to start working with NGOs in Africa and not buy into like the whole party club scene or whatever that was. Like, to kind of go a different route in that sense. And then I think I had another major fork in the road about a year and a half ago when, I'll be honest, when my ex-fiance left me, and I recognized like, dude, like, I wasn't being a strong man in the relationship, like, at all. And I could go in and I could, do what some men do, whatever, and just go around and just sleep with other women or whatever that is to kind of numb out. Or I could go and dive heavy into my own internal work, right? And just really go within myself and root out all those insecurities, root out all that toxic shame that I was holding within me. And I think those were the two major forks in the road. I mean, I'm sure, like, I had moments where, like, I've been handed some really heavy drugs, and I said to myself, wow, if I do this, if I do this one, this is it for me. Like, I'm not going to come back from this. So I've had those small ones as well, but I think those are the two major ones that I can think of off the top of my head. That's
scary shit to look at yourself in the mirror and not like the person you're seeing, and recognize that you've made life choices that have got you to this point. But then at the same time, you're like, you know what? Those life choices now got me to this point that I am right now. So do you look back thinking, oh man, I feel sad and bad, or like I feel gypped of my childhood because I experienced this really traumatic abuse at the hands of a family member? Or are you like, you know what? That fucking showed me so many lessons and made me who I am today. So fuck it. I'm glad that happened, because now I am this man in front of you right now.
I think we can have multiple parts of ourselves, right? So there is a piece of me. I'm not gonna lie, right? There's a piece of me that still feels like a victim. That is like that still has these thoughts of like, woe is me. Why did this have to happen to me? This is bullshit, right? Other people have to go through what I went through and all that stuff. And then I do, for the most part, like I am able to like sit within myself and recognize like this was my path. This was my path, and through this, I do believe I'm very good at my job. Like I know how to help people in the darkest, murkiest aspects of oneself, right? Because I've navigated that terrain and those waters within my own life. So it has given me perspective. Like I think it was my journey to experience every part of the shadow aspects of the masculine, right? So I can help others kind of navigate those waters as well.
Before you jumped on, Zach, I was talking with Anthony about this, and we got into this conversation about men and abuse, men who've experienced abuse in their life. And we first started talking about kids, and especially kids in middle and high school, say when they're abused by young men, abused by a female in their life. You hear stories about, even more recently, stories about female teachers that are abusing young men. And I put myself in that situation, and I think if that was me, I couldn't have said anything. I couldn't, if I felt, emotionally traumatized by that situation.
Like you didn't want it to happen, and the way society deems it out to be, or let's say around your friends, it's like, oh, dude, you're banging Mrs. That's awesome. You get a high five, and you want to go drink a beer with this kid because he's going and having sex with his teacher, and you look at a young man. That's how it's looked at. They're not the victim. They're like, that's awesome, right? That's so cool that happened.
He wasn't victimized by an adult in his life. He was banging the teacher, right? Yeah. That's how it comes across, right? So as we were getting prepared for this, I was like, there's definitely, and I'm not saying, oh, woe is me being a man in society, a white dude in society today. I totally understand that. But also it's kind of a double standard with the way men are treated if they go through an abusive situation as they're growing up.
Well, yeah, men, we're not allowed to really experience our pain, right? We're like the nuance in situations is never considered with us, right? And so, yeah, it's like no one really ever stops back and thinks, how does that affect you developmentally, right? When an authoritative, trusted figure sexually abuses you, right? I mean, what does how does that impact your psyche, right? And your ability to form healthy connections and relationships, right? It's you're a man, so get the fuck over it, right? And so I agree. I don't think we don't really consider how abuse and trauma really affects men. We're supposed to press it down, put on a mask, and go to work and still stay productive. And I agree, it is part of the healthy masculine to provide, to protect, to be productive. But we also have to accept that there are moments in our lives where we may have to step back and not be the provider for a little bit, that we may need to heal. There's this, I brought this up in a recent talk I did, but, I read this great book. It's called Lincoln's Melancholy. Okay. And so, it's my personal opinion that Abraham Lincoln was our country's greatest president. What people don't know is that Abraham Lincoln suffered from severe depression. He had a lot of manic depressive episodes throughout his life. When he was in his early 20s, he actually had a nervous breakdown and ran through the streets of his town naked. Okay. And even when he was president, he would carry a knife on him. And they would ask, why do you carry this knife on him? And he's like, because if I need to commit suicide, I just know I can do it. Right. And this is someone, if that was to exist within today's society, right? If someone was running for political office and you found this guy had a nervous breakdown and was running through the street naked and had manic depressive episodes, that person would never be president. Right. Like Lincoln wasn't always on his game, so to speak. Right. But I think it is through that dark night of soul, through those times, that allowed him to actually be a great leader. And in society, we don't hold space for that part of that man anymore. Right. I think that's also why we lack, sometimes good leadership at the top. I'm not here to go into politics or anything, but we have to accept that there are so many different stages within a man's journey. And some of those stages we need to be weak and we need to surrender and let go and collapse. And I don't know if we hold space for that.
I find that so important for us to understand because, like, I grew up looking at men as there's two, like, when you have a conversation with a man, especially just about, like, a confrontation or you want to discuss something, that's going to end in a fist fight in my eyes. Every single conversation that I would have with a man, I assume that if I'm disagreeing with them in any way, then I need to get ready to fight. And so I would go into every conversation so timid and being afraid of men in that sense, and also being scared of being weak. Like, let's say I lose that fight if it ends up in a confrontation and I don't win in this fight that's going to happen because I disagreed with someone. That's going through my head constantly. And so that's why for me, sometimes relationships with men weren't as tightly knit as it was with women in my life because I didn't feel that threat, and I felt like I could be more emotional and they could understand me on that level, because just what I deemed as this is how men were viewed in my life all the time, is they were intimidating, they would fight, they wouldn't discuss feelings. There was no space for me to just be who I needed to be around them in that manner.
Look, I'm with you. Right. I mean, look, it was really frustrating for me because a few years ago, I was someone who really just only had male friends. But when my life collapsed and everything was going wrong, right? Like, my male friends really didn't know how to show up for me. Right. I remember I hit up like one of my best friends, like after my ex and I broke up, and he was just like, "Did you cry, bro?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he was like, "Ah," and just like fucking laughed at it. And I was like, I had to form more female friendships, right, to be able to get through that period and actually be able to have some of those emotional releases because I didn't feel comfortable around the masculine to do that. Now, as I've started engaging in a lot more men's group work or whatever, we've been able to hold that space for each other, but we're all still incredibly and insanely timid around each other to start. Like, it takes a long time to kind of bridge that gap of discomfort where we start feeling able to kind of have emotional expression around with each other, because any type of vulnerability around other men, you're kind of like, excuse my language, you're just going to get called. You're going to get called a bitch, right? And so it is something that we have to work on collectively as men to not shame one another because we're having an emotional expression. Like, as someone who's done the deep inner healing work, whatever, it's easy to suppress everything. That's the easy shit. Pushing it down and just walking, just showing up in physical presence, like, that's easy. Actually going in and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to be in those heavy, dense, like, episodes of emotional pain, that's the tough shit, right? But we consider the latter weak and the former strong. Right. And I'm not saying you need to be a man, and one of my mentors, he calls it being a flow boy, right? Where you just allow every emotion to flow through you. Like, I'm not saying that, right? We have to be grounded and present with our emotional things and not just unleash it on people. But we have to be present with it. We can't just press it down anymore.
And that flow boy is definitely struck a chord with me. I think about your story about, you went through the breakup, you were emotional, and your friend basically was like, come on, stop being a fucking bitch, let's go. Because basically it would be like, let's go out, get banged up, let's go bang some girls, like, here we go. And that's how
fucking numb ourselves.
Deal with it. It's like this numbing, buffering way to deal with shit.
And when we repress all this stuff, that's why it comes out in those ways, because we don't allow it to go through its process in the beginning when it should. Then it comes up in these manners that are unhealthy as a man.
Yep, absolutely. And the idea that you've now found this network of people, and building men, it's about, like, fuck, like, we totally believe that you need to be strong, you need to provide, be productive, do those types of things, be cognizant of your thoughts, your emotions, like how your actions impact other people. But at the same time, it's tougher to look deep inside. It's tougher to do that fucking work because it's really uncomfortable in there.
And you could probably only do that part of it to be the provider, the protector, be that grounded human being when you had that emotional, when you're not repressing and suppressing all these things. Like, in my argument, that would be when I felt the best is when I started to look inward, when I felt like I could actually provide and be this person for other people that they could lean on me, is when I allowed myself to go through all of these feelings and emotions with it.
So Zach, when you're working with men now, you do this shadow work and you're a men's coach. What are certain things that you see that are commonalities between the men that you're working with right now? What are the issues that they're coming to you with, the problems that they have, their emotional well-being or their mental state? What are certain things that you see as, okay, this is something that I pick out as a commonality with these men?
I've worked with veterans before, and I see a lot of things where, like, if men feel, and you mentioned it or whatever, if men feel uncomfortable or in conflict, they immediately go into a fight response, right? Which is like, yeah, and it's the way for them to feel power in the situation, right? And so what I noticed, whatever, is that response is usually like a coping mechanism, because at some point, like, dad or some other male figure like overpowered them when they were younger and they were helpless, right? And so now they resort to a fight response because it's the only thing that allows them to feel power, and the kind of, they're almost trying to correct like some trauma from like decades ago when they were just a boy, right? So typically what I'll do is I'll take them in the body to that past moment, right, where dad had them by the neck up against a tree and was screaming at them, whatever, and I tell them, go revisit that moment and beat the shit out of dad. And that seems intense and that seems severe, but we are always trying to suppress those moments where we felt powerless and helpless, and we need to complete that fight or flight response from when we were younger, and not over and over and over again in the present moment. Does that make sense? So it's this need to like overcompensate for that helpless, powerless young boy, and the ways that we adapt and cope to that, right? And when really we just need to revisit that old memory, that old experience, and correct it, if that makes sense.
And it's that feeling of weakness. We talk about it all the time here. It's, as men, one of the biggest things that we see is the fear of feeling weak or not as much or not enough. That's the thing that comes up time and time again when we're talking to people, and I'm sure you see the same exact thing, is that fear of weakness.
Yeah, we are so scared to be weak, and then we overcompensate by trying to be a peacock and flash its fucking feathers or whatever, right? And kind of get in those stances essentially. And sometimes we just men need to allow ourselves to just feel weak and powerless. That was a lot of my healing journey. I had to go back and revisit those moments where I felt weak and powerless, and let that energy run through my system, and then show me, wait, I am actually not weak and powerless anymore, but I needed to go and revisit those moments and allow myself to feel weak. I think we need to hold space for men to allow themselves to feel weak, but not overindulge in it, not take on a victim mindset or a victim mentality, right? To go, this is a past feeling, and now I need to show up.
You talk a lot about as well that there's been this, the pendulum has swung so many different times in different directions, where it went from that, suck it up, buttercup, rub some dirt on it, push everything down, be this tough, stoic, strong man, all the way to everything is so fucking woo-woo, and, we're all going to run through the daisy fields with flowers and, feel into our beings and hold each other, and which is no good either. And you talk about this idea of toxic, you call it toxic positivity. So we'd love to hear your definition of that, and like where you fall on that pendulum right there.
I hate toxic positivity more than anything in the world, and this is all I see like in the self-help communities, right? Which is like, we're just going to completely neglect everything. Everything happens for a reason, right? It's going to be better tomorrow, and it's like, I fucking know, Stacy, but right now it's hard, okay? Like, right now I'm really pissed off, okay? And so like we do a really shit job at holding space for what someone's present experience is. Look, we don't want to overindulge in in the blackness and the darkness, but sometimes we need to be in the blackness and darkness without someone saying like, it's okay, just recognize that this is happening for a reason. Like I don't want to hear that shit anymore, right? Because that makes us fracture and disassociate from the parts of us that are having a very real, visceral human experience, right? The parts of us that are in shame, the parts of us that I feel like that's the biggest problem with men right now, is we don't know how to sit in shame, right? And when we do, we just get bamboozled with you're being a weak motherfucker, or just think about it, it's going to be better tomorrow. This is all building you up, and it's like I don't need to hear that right now, right? Not just right now. I'll come out of it, but right now I just need to feel like shit. Okay.
Right.
And be angry. Like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, as a man, I want to be angry.
Okay, yeah, I want to touch on this real quickly, okay? Because this is the biggest problem. So, two, right, is like, as someone who'd been in talk therapy for over a decade, and that was a big part of me being able to heal and come out of my shit or whatever. Like, I was a ball of mush like a decade ago. Our present day therapy models, like, I think men heal different than women. I'm talking about men more on the masculine pole than women more on the feminine, right? I think, a lot of this, like a lot of therapy techniques, I think they work more effectively with women than men, okay? Because I always hear from everyone, anger is just a secondary emotion. Anger isn't real. Anger is just high. Sometimes anger is the primary emotion. And for men, it very often is the primary emotion. Like anger is what allows us to know that our boundaries are being violated. Like our sense of self is being threatened. Anger is what allows us to define what is us and what is someone else, to press back against someone. And we as society are now scared of a man's anger. And so a lot of the work I do with men is finding healthy outlets to channel and express that anger. What men do now is they either suppress it completely or they unleash it in really raw, like not good ways, right? But there is a way to sit and be present with rage, let it fill up your system, and then choose how to respond with it in a constructive means. And anger is a healthy emotion. I see so much depression around with men, and oftentimes it's because there's been no outlet for them to express their anger, right? Us as society, we want to suppress a man's anger more than anything, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, the whole suppression of any emotion is it's a really dangerous game you're playing right there. It's going to come out eventually in some way, shape, or form. It's going to come out either in an outburst. It's going to come out in a dysfunctional relationship because you don't know how to deal with your shit. So it's how do you go about helping men? It's almost like when you shake up a soda bottle, you can't just fucking open it up. Like, you have to, like, let the air out, let the CO2 out just a little bit so it starts seeping out, and then you're like, okay, I'm back to the stable spot. So if in your work, how do you go about helping men deal with that shit? People are coming through their fucking
more intentionally, too.
Yes, yep. What's your strategy? How do you go about helping people work through that shit then?
So, like, typically, whatever, right, we have to reconnect men to their bodies. Sometimes men are just in chronic states of fight or flight where they're just going, and they're not really in tune with what's happening. So I have them connect into their bodies, find that sensation of discomfort, right, and sit in it. And typically, anger is like held at the root of the spot, like the base of the spine or something like that. And we kind of allow it to fill up the vehicle. And when it becomes too much, find another space in your body that feels okay. Now, typically, sometimes men have suppressed things for so long, we will need to engage in primal scream therapy. I know in the 60s they said it doesn't work. I don't know what to fucking tell you. I've done it. I've seen other men do it. I think it's very effective if done in really regulated, isolated environments. So sometimes a man does need to just fucking punch the shit out of a pillow if they're very emotionally suppressed. They need to really scream. And then I say, okay, bring it back in. Bring it back in. Breathe in. Come back home. You're safe. Right? It's teaching that regulation. Like, let it out. Come back home. Do you feel safe now? Do you have any more to let out? Go let it out. Come back home, right? So it's kind of dipping in and out. It's this process, I call it titration, right? Of just dipping in and out, showing that the emotion doesn't have to overwhelm you, that you can consciously exert the emotion and then come back home when it begins to feel overwhelming or you feel out of control.
Did anybody ever catch you getting in touch with your body, Anthony? Did you ever get caught doing that?
A few times, but that.
So I want to title this episode "Shut the Fuck Up, Stacy." I want to, right? Because that's the thing. Like, to name her, to name that person who's talking to you in that really negative way. I love it.
Or who's not letting you be this person that you're just trying to let out right now, and just trying to, like, calm down. Calm down, and never in the history of fucking saying calm down has someone actually fucking calmed down.
Exactly.
So it's so funny.
No, and Stacy could be replaced with Amber, Diane, Karen, right? There's a lot of names that I feel like we've all experienced.
Yeah, but what a deep way to think about it. Like, not as men understanding the emotion of anger. It's really fascinating to me. I haven't thought about it in this way as of yet. Really embracing it. Like, we will experience this shit. It doesn't mean that it has to be a secondary emotion. It could be something. It's a visceral reaction to a situation or a stimulus that we need to embrace and fully understand the best way to deal with it. Not saying that you need to go like fucking, what was it, Falling Down with Michael Douglas when he walks into the McDonald's and he beats the fuck out of like we don't want to get to that point.
But that's what comes up when you don't allow it to actually flow through you. And the amount of times that I could say that this came up and I just don't remember anything that happened because it boiled up so much and I just kept pushing it down and down and down. And then someone says something. Doesn't matter what the fuck it is.
We're not serving whammy burgers with cheese right now.
And then I'm like, are you
That's what it was, a whammy burger. Yes. Got it.
Nice. Good job, brother.
Well, I hope you don't mind if I actually interject and touch on something, because I've seen this in my own life and I've seen it with a lot of men, is when we have to suppress our anger, we can fall into the nice guy syndrome, right? We mentioned that at the beginning.
Yep.
And then that nice guy, it ends up acting out in very shadowy ways, like covert narcissist ways or whatever, right? The guys end up being like emotionally manipulative, even emotionally manipulative around sex, because they're not allowing that natural expression to release. And then that's suppressing that. It comes out in really weird ways. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Let's go deeper into that idea too. We talked initially about men who were the victim of abuse, and then men who show up as nice guys. So I find myself in both of those categories. You know, I was definitely the victim of being in like a narcissistic, abusive relationship for a period of time. Didn't recognize it until I was out of it, and when I was able to take a step back and look at it at a different angle, I was like, holy fuck. Once I started to really understand it in a deeper way, I was like, wow, this was happening to me, and I was making excuses. I was trying to trauma bond. There were all these things that I was doing that I didn't even recognize at the time, but one of them was showing up as a nice guy and being like, well, maybe if I rub your back, I'll get laid tonight, or, you know, something like that. Like, there were all these crazy things that were happening to me. So in your work with men, do you see men that have gone through an abusive situation in the past find themselves in that, either one, being attracted to people that treated them like they were treated when they were younger by a trusted adult in a really abusive way, and two, showing up with that nice guy syndrome?
Yeah, I'll see both, because that abusive behavior has been normalized, right? Or sometimes, you know, if it's a primary like caregiver, primary figure, right? It's that inner child part of us that still wants to receive love from that primary caregiver. So we find someone that has qualities similar to that, and it's like it's a weird subconscious way of trying to like meet that core childhood need through this person, but we end up just getting kind of abused in the same way. It's almost a subconscious mind of trying to get us to actually feel that first innate wound. And yeah, I see the nice guy syndrome all the time. I was a dick for like a lot of my life, and then I overcorrected and went into the nice guy, right? And then everyone's like, Zach is such a nice guy. I actually really wasn't that nice, right? I seemed nice, right? And it's almost a form of covert narcissism, right? I'm being nice because I want to feel safe. I'm being nice so you won't be mean to me. I want to be nice so you'll bang me, right? And there's outcome attached to you being nice. So it's not really coming from a true, authentic place, right? And healthy women, like healthy, beautiful women who are in the power, they don't want a fucking nice guy, right? They don't. They want a guy that's going to stand in their truth, that is going to be willing to say no to them at times, right? That's going to be willing to upset them at times. Right? The nice guy is basically someone you're energetically castrating yourself, right? Because everything you're doing is just to gain approval from the feminine, because you don't approve of yourself, right? So yeah, that's how I kind of see that. I have to work through nice guy syndrome with a lot of the men that I work with, right? It was a part of my journey as well. I had to learn to not be so nice, to piss people off, and to be able to sit in that discomfort, right? If we grew up people pleasers, and I did to an extent too, to piss someone off and feel the discomfort of someone not liking you because you're just being you, right?
I know that just from experience how hard that is for me to deal with, like to the point of where, and Dennis can tell you, I made myself sick. I was viscerally, like internally sick. I lost weight. I felt like crap because of the fact that I was not standing up for myself in the slightest bit, and I was getting pushed around in whatever direction everyone wanted me to go, because I was scared to stand up for myself, because in my eyes that meant that I wasn't going to be accepted, by my group. I wasn't going to be in the tribe, and then I would die, right? And then that just led to death from growing up with abandonment issues that I felt for whatever reason. And it was really hard for me to find that balance of like being grounded, but also allowing my emotions to come through. And I didn't know how to go through that. You know, I didn't understand how I could make that work and how I can be both. How as a man, you need to stand up for yourself, but you also need to allow yourself to feel. So like, I'm just trying to figure out how would you say to balance those two? Because I think that's really difficult to do, because we always just look at one end or the other. You're either really emotional pussy or you're a toxic man who's an asshole, who's a dick.
Yeah, I mean, you still need discernment in terms of, you can't just lash out and just say whatever you feel or think in that moment, right? We still have to be conscientious of how that's going to impact someone, right? But we can't betray ourselves, right? We can't push away our own needs. We can't neglect our own boundaries because we're scared of how someone would perceive it, right? When we're acting out of fear, when we're not voicing our truth out of fear, just because of how it might impact us, I think that's what we have to be conscientious of. And I'm being drawn to even talk about this or whatever, but like, and this is going to be a touchy subject, but I think cancel culture really impacts men from being able to speak their truth. As you talk about, like, we are hardwired to not be exiled from the tribe, right? And so now we're kind of in this culture of like, if I say something or whatever, the whole mob might push me away. And so we see a lot of men like kind of, not say or think what they're feeling in that moment because they're afraid of being, collectively like shut out. And I actually went through that at one point, and it definitely impacted me.
Well, just from experience, I got fired from my last job because I didn't want to get vaccinated. That's why I got fired, and they got rid of me. And that was sitting with me, and I've never said this when we were talking on here, but I had to sit with that for a long time, and I was scared to even tell people that I wasn't vaccinated, that, I didn't get this, and I wasn't planning on getting it. And once that came up, the worst thing that I felt could have happened. I was getting, people were looking at me like, you're a terrible person, you're selfish. Every name in the book that you can think of, they were calling me that. These people that, quote unquote, I thought were my friends at the school that I worked at, were not. They completely shut me out in every way, and they kicked me off campus within 2 weeks, and I worked there for almost 7 years. And so to me, but for the first time in my life, I was liberated, and I felt I gained my power back as a man because finally I stood up for something that I believed in. Whatever you feel in it didn't make a difference, but in me in that moment, that's what I felt. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. And even though I was pushed and shit on the entire time and pushed away, I felt like I got that power back in that moment. It was a liberating experience.
You got to be willing to risk things. Right. And I'm so I actually I don't know if you saw, I did a post recently about like, vaccines and why people are saying no to it and how collectively shaming someone is actually pushing people to ideological extremes. Right. Like, it's not helpful. I know for me, if you guys, what I was like, I started off in my field as like, a fucking spiritual healer, like an energy healer. Like I trained under shamanic healers and stuff, whatever. But like, I was being pushed to always just, be zen and toe the line and say the right thing and everything's perfect and da da da. And about like 8 or 9 months ago, I finally went on social media, right? And I was just like, I'm gonna blow everything the fuck up, right? I can't do this anymore. They're turning me into a numbed out, disassociated zombie guru who just literally regurgitates Osho quotes. Like, I can't fucking do this anymore. Right. And I went out on social media and I just shit on the whole spiritual community. I shit on the mental health community. I said the majority of therapists have the emotional intelligence equivalent to a jelly bean. And I was just like, and I stood up and I was just like, this is bullshit. This whole field's insane. Does anyone else not see it? And I had already contacted my former law classmates. I was like, yo, help me out. I'll go be a paralegal in the basement of some shitty firm. I don't care. I need to speak my truth. I don't care about the money I'm going to lose or whatever, right? And surprisingly, everyone was like, finally, someone said it, right? And so I lost clients. I think like every like top therapist started unfollowing me. But like, it's when we speak our truth, the situations that we need to be in will find their way to us, and we have to be willing to let go of what we presently have. right?
I'm so happy you fucking said that. And Anthony, I give you all the credit. We didn't bring it up one time. I'm glad you
because I kept saying I quit my job, but I didn't fucking quit my job. I didn't want to quit my job.
It's so funny. One, I remember the moment exactly. We had a conversation about it, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck to do. Like, but you were being put in this little box, and you weren't able to be yourself. That was the moment when we talked before about the Robert Frost poem, like the two roads. That was your fucking moment. That was your moment where you're like, fuck it. I'm going to be me. I'm going to bust out of this shit. I'm going to speak who I am, and I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks. And I'll tell you what, Zach, too. Like, I still remember there was a moment from even doing the podcast where for such a long time I played it in between the lines, and it was just like, I need to be safe. I can't curse. I can't talk about anything that's really authentic to me, because what happens if ... A school district hears this and they hear me talking negatively about education. I won't be able to work in a school anymore. Or if I say what happened in my previous relationships. What happens if someone hears it? Well, fuck it. I'm just going to talk about it. And if someone doesn't like it, I don't give a shit anymore. It is what it is. I just fucking, and it's so liberating to get to that point where you can just put the shit out on the table. And if people don't like it, they'll find their way away from you. But there's so many more people out there that are authentically attracted to you being you being that version of you that you're just like fucking raw and real. It's out there on the table. I truly commend you for doing that. And then Anthony too, that took some balls there, brother.
Yeah, I mean that, and the people that you gain, like the following that you get after you start speaking your truth, is way more in line with what you believe in, because again, you're finally talking for yourself, and that's what I've noticed. I'm like, after I started speaking out about what I believe and things that I stand in, the people who are with me are the ones who are my true friends, and I find out who isn't part of my tribe, right? So all those people there, clearly, the first chance they got, they dismissed me and pushed me away. Cool, that's fine. Now I know when push comes to shove, you're not there for me, and that's clear to me now.
Yeah. You when you speak your truth, you're gonna lose things. You're gonna lose people, things, reputation, status, right? But you're gonna come into alignment with what really is in accordance with you, right? And so it's really tough in that initial thing when we lose that. I even want to touch on what you talked about in terms of censorship, and in terms of like I think men all the way together are so suppressed, because now we live in a society where there is such a small bandwidth of acceptable behaviors and acceptable things to say, and like we're not allowed to make mistakes, right? If we make a mistake or fall outside that bandwidth or whatever, we'll find ourselves on the edge of society. And we are so craving to just say our authentic truth, to really just own what we feel or think in that moment. And to be able to make a mistake and still be accepted, right? And so I think, as a society today, we have to be willing to say our authentic truth. I don't even want to get into politics, and I'm not even a fan of the dude, but like that, people wonder why Donald Trump won president. It was because people saw themselves in him, in a sense of like, this dude says whatever the fuck he's thinking in the moment. Not that he's even right, not even saying the good thing, whatever, but like, holy shit, the guy's talking about his dick size in a Republican primary. Right? So we're so desperate to just be able to make mistakes and to be able to just say what we think or feel in the moment, and not have our entire livelihoods be held over us.
That's such an important point. And you're absolutely right. It is so fucking liberating to be able to talk about that shit, where you're not worried about being judged. You're not worried about fucking, the way that it looks to other people, because this is how you truly feel. You know what I mean? I appreciate you saying that. There's so many things that so many times that I was like, I can't say that. I can't think that.
Who is it going to offend?
Yeah, exactly.
Every single thing that we fucking say, someone is going to disagree with somewhere. And we're in this social media world where we have thousands and thousands of followers that we're trying to impress. That's not fucking realistic.
Right.
That's just not meant to have. As human beings, we're not meant to be able to have all these connections like that, right? So someone's going to get pissed along the way.
Like, to say, listen, when I take a shit, I look at the toilet paper every single time. When I wipe, I look at it. I'm so interested in what's going on right there. I don't know if that's something that I would have said a year ago now.
That resonates with me.
Listen, I take a look.
I'm always checking in on the bowel movement. I gotta see what's happening.
Yeah. And then when you wipe and there's nothing there, you're like, holy shit.
It's a shadow poo. Yeah.
Shadow poo. Oh, shut the fuck up, Stacy, and the shadow poop with Zack Alexander on the Building Men podcast.
I love it. That's a great title episode.
That's clickbait. That'll get me listening right there. All right, Zach. We could go on for 5 days talking to you, dude. But I wanna give you an opportunity to let the Building Men audience know where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so as weird it is, the primary ways to find me right now are on Instagram and TikTok. We're working on remodeling my website. I go under just Zack Alexander _. And I do offer men's coaching in a 4-month one-on-one container, whatever, right? It's weekly sessions and daily check-ins, and I'm there to take you into those shadowy parts and hold space for you and kind of be that guide on that journey. So that's where you can find me, and I do a lot of writings through my Instagram just on everyday topics and everyday normal things. And
you just put something out. You were with purple hair. Was that? Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. That was good.
Anthony, any final thoughts?
This was probably one of the most cathartic conversations that I've had in a very long time. And really, I'm like so fired up right now. I feel amazing. So thank you for that, brother. Really, that was powerful, that conversation. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you opening up about speaking your truth about what happened to you, right? Because I think people need to understand that, and to sit with that all day, every day, it's tough, right? So I appreciate you taking that moment to just be like, yo, this is what the fuck happened, right?
Yeah. Final question we want to start asking moving forward with all of our guests is if there was something that you can give advice to the people that are listening, one thing that they might be able to do immediately, something that they could wake up and start doing tomorrow that can make a lasting impact on their life, on their mental health, on their emotional health, what would that be?
Learn to say no.
I love that.
Learn to say no, right? A lot of us are people pleasers. We feel like we have to say yes. Learn to say no. If something doesn't feel in accordance with you, say fucking no. That's how we develop our sense of self, right? We have to find where our that non-negotiable boundaries are. Right, that's where we define our limits between us and someone else. When we start saying no to things that don't feel good to us, right? So as men, we got to be able to say no.
I absolutely love that. That resonates with me on such a deep level. You don't even know, Zach. Truly appreciate you being here on the Building Men podcast. You can reach out to us, buildingmen, coach@gmail.com. gmail.com.
Gmail.
Buildingmen.io is our website. We're an IO website factory here. We renovated our website. It looks pretty good right now, so check that out.
It does.
Building.men on Instagram. Our sponsors are Finish the Race Apparel, FTR Apparel, and Become Stronger Industries are 2 sponsors. We'll talk more about that. And we are in the process of creating a retreat, a men's retreat called The Hero's Journey. It will take place in Lake Tahoe, April 29th through May 1st. More information to come. If you want information right now, you could DM us to reach out to find more information. Go a step further than you thought you could go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.